Great. Okay, I think we're going to start off so we don't run behind this morning. And my name is Maura Farrell, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Galway in the west of Ireland. And I'm also the coordinator of the FLIARA Project. And at this stage, hopefully everybody knows that FLIARA stands for Female-Led Innovation in Agriculture and in Rural Areas. And I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to invite you to welcome you all here this morning to, I suppose, one of our first big webinars that maybe gives and provides some of the findings and some of the work that we've been carrying out in FLIARA and some of the fantastic highs that we've been having as well over the last, I suppose, 2 years and 2 or 3 months that we've been running at this stage. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to give you a very quick presentation to kick us off this morning and to welcome you all. So I'm going to do that. So bear with me, and we're going to start off here this morning. Great. I think everybody can see that. And again, what we have for you today is we have a very good and very diverse agenda. We've looked inwardly to the FLIARA project, where we're going to present some of the results that we've had already, but we've also looked outwardly to see some of the really key people right across the world that are already and also working in relation to gender and agriculture and rural areas study. So we're going to have a panel in the morning as well as the speakers, and a panel as well after a very short break, along with some reflections and again, some of our results. Again, just to give you a very quick overview, really the FLIARA project was very much about ensuring that women are embedded in a much more effective, innovative ecosystem. And that ecosystem for us in FLIARA was all about spotlighting the achievements of women that are already working on farms and in rural areas, and allow these achievements maybe to provide a source of inspiration and knowledge to other women who want to engage in any of this kind of work. We also in FLIARA wanted to network, create networks with key actors that would engage innovation and innovators. We wanted to heighten the visibility of these women within national and international institutions. And in doing that, we really were hoping to influence policy, to change the direction, change the decision makers, and change the context for these women. We were hoping to increase capacity and improve skills, to empower the women that are there, but also empower future generations of women who want to embrace innovation on farms and in rural areas. We have 15 partners right across Europe in 10 countries. And these partners have worked really, really hard over the last nearly 2.5 years to ensure really that the FLIARA project became as successful as it really is, to drive forward an agenda in and around rural innovation, in and around gender innovation and women on farms and in rural areas. What have we achieved to date? Really, as everybody knows who works on any of these European Horizon projects, they work through work packages. And we started with a feeder work package that looked at the concepts, the knowledge, and we designed the case studies. We looked very much solidly at benchmarking, and we started to look at policy frameworks. Via one of our project partners, who will talk to you very shortly, Thomas from the University of Turku in Finland, he looked very much and engaged all our partners and the women on the ground in future trends that would really look at envisioning, innovating, and assessing the future perspectives for innovation for women. We also looked very strongly at the innovative women that are there already, and we carried out 20 case studies that involved 200 cases right across Europe. We compared and we carried out insights in relation to these women, and we also selected 20 wonderful women ambassadors for the FLIARA project. Our community of practice has been hugely successful on the ground, and we've had huge events already in Galway, Slovenia, and Italy. And we're very shortly going to meet in Sweden for our final 4th community of practice events. We also have online events that are running on a consistent basis. Policy design is really where we're at the moment. And engaging, empowering, and innovation is the core ideas of the policy design that's going on in the FLIARA project at the moment. We've really put a huge amount into communicating, disseminating and exploitation, making sure that we spotlight the rural and farm innovative women that are out there and spotlight them so we can empower other women to do similar work. We've hopefully managed as effectively and as efficiently as we possibly can the FLIARA project to really bring something new to the table, bring something new and exciting, and empower as much as we can other women to do likewise. So for the rest of this morning's webinar, we're going to look at some of the key findings and insights from the FLIARA project, the future directions in relation to policies, insights from other people outside of the FLIARA project as well, and some of your own thoughts and your ideas as we move forward. So this is our agenda for this morning, and a very quick stop and look at the FLIARA project itself. So from here, I'm going to call on our first speaker. And our first speaker is somebody who has been very, very good to the FLIARA project, Elena Schubert. And Elena, from the Directorate General for Agriculture and Rural Development, DG Agri, in the European Commission, has really been one of those fantastic women who has been a promoter herself of rural gender innovation from the perspective of the DG Agri and the European Commission. So we're absolutely delighted to welcome Elena to speak here this morning.
Thank you very much, Maura, for these very kind words. It's encouraging to hear this. I'm very happy to be here with you today. Let me start by congratulating to all of you who have contributed to the big success of this project. And all the conclusions come very timely, as we are, at the crossroads. We are still implementing CAP 2023-2027. And at the same time, we are preparing the new CAP. We have recently adopted the vision for agriculture and food, and we are now sorting out how to best support farmers, women farmers, and also people in rural areas, and obviously also women who participate in rural economy. So it's very important for us in the European Commission, for me in this case, to listen to your findings, to your reflections about this important topic, how to enhance women in farming and genuinely increase the participation of women in rural economy. So I would like my intervention to focus on two main elements. The first one is really to draw the attention to the achievements of CAP during the period 2023-2027. And why do I say achievements? It's because it is for the first time in the history of CAP that we have a specific reference to the need to enhance participation of women in farming and really support women to take part actively in rural economy under specific objective H. Never before it was mentioned in CAP, and now we have it. And I think this is a big step forward that we will certainly build upon for the next CAPs to come. Within the CAP 2023-2027, we have been able to encourage member states to propose specific interventions in favor of women. And let me draw your attention to the fact that a Spanish strategic program introduced a measure of positive discrimination for women farmers under young farmer schemes. Young farmers in certain regions in Spain receive 15% higher percentage points support under direct payments. I mean, this is a very revolutionary step because this has never been the case in CAP before. And we very much welcome in the European Commission initiatives like that. And we are proud of it, that this has happened and that we have provided this policy framework, which enables that sort of positive discrimination that Charter of Fundamental Rights favors in sectors where women are underrepresented. And in CAP and in farming and in rural areas, when we look at the indicators, women are underrepresented. And that's the reason why we are very happy to see such initiatives. Also under Irish program, we see enhanced payment support for women farmers. And this is really something we would like to build upon in the future CAP to come. We have been also happy to see with our colleagues dealing with LEADER that many member states agreed that they are going to impose it as a requirement that at least 50% of women are now have to be in the leader decision-making bodies, because we do believe that women should be in all rooms and all tables where decisions are being made. This is, I think, the prerequisite for gender equality, that we have women as leaders, women who take actively part in decisions. And we are happy to see that majority of member states is going along this path when it comes to leader. And the third big advancement in CAP 2023-2027 programming period in terms of gender equality is the fact that we now push for a strengthened collection of gender disaggregated data. And this is an important point because this allows for tracking of the budget and how much of it goes to women. For me, this is the major step forward, because then we can see, okay, so how much money really went to women, where we are and where we want to get in the future. And now we still don't have the evaluation of the current programming period, obviously, but once we have more information, I'll be happy when we meet again, and we will certainly have possibilities to talk about this. What has materialized from all these possibilities that member states received, and how much women profited. But I think we are on the right track. And now let me make some comments and remarks regarding the future. When we met last time, my colleague and my head of unit, Margaret Bateson, had a presentation where she said, well, we cannot say how the future will be because we still are in the reflection phase. And now I can say that we already know more, as the vision for agriculture and food has been recently adopted. And it very much declares its commitment to gender equality. First of all, by saying that we need to attract more people, more women and young people into agriculture by creating enabling working conditions. So this is very clear that this is important for our Commissioner, Hansen. Gender equality is important for him, and the generational renewal, including the making farming and rural areas attractive for women, is something that is important for him. In this vein, the vision also announces that we are going to create a platform for women in farming. So we are going to now, we are reflecting about how best to implement this initiative that has been announced by the vision. And we will certainly need to get on board as many women and representatives of the organizations that are there to defend the rights of women on board, to reflect together with them what actions are needed for attracting more women into farming. So this will be precisely the objective of this platform. And events like today's event is an important one because it provides us with ideas how best to implement these actions. So this is for the future. Let me also mention that, as I have already said, that generational renewal is key for our Commissioner. And we want to make sure that women, younger women who are aspiring to become farmers, who are ready to do something, to take active part in rural economy, that they get the necessary tools that they need for doing this job. And this is precisely what we are going to look at and what we are now preparing in the generational renewal strategy that is going to be adopted still this year in 2025. And we will make sure that women also feature in an adequate way in this strategy. So the young women do not have to face the obstacle that their older counterparts have been confronted with during the decades when it came to farming or in the rural areas. And this is what we want to change. We don't want our young women to struggle with this sort of problems. At the same time, we are all aware that here we are talking about policies that are, while they are very crucial and important for generational renewal, a lot of these policies are the national competence. For example, it is very difficult for women to get access to land. It is very difficult for women to get access to loans. It is also difficult when we talk about social security coverage, pension schemes, which are important because we know that women suffer more than men from old age poverty because of inappropriate social security coverage. So we have to see together with member states how we design a comprehensive package that is attractive package for farmers, because farming, as also our commissioner highlights very often, it is a sector that you need to be competitive in the market. So how can we do it for women also, that they are able to sustain these very difficult and competitive conditions? So these are the questions we are going to also deal with, and we are dealing with in the preparation of the strategy. And I can promise you that women will not be forgotten also under this policy. So I would like to now come to the conclusion of my short intervention. Let me reiterate, I really thank you for your efforts, because you are the real ambassadors of gender equality in rural areas, in all these places where you work and where it matters. And at the same time, I wish that we get more on board men, because they are crucial also for gender equality. We need to get on board also people who are perhaps not that convinced that gender equality matters. Also for our events, I will try to do my best on my part when we organize commissioned event to get also persons who are skeptical about gender equality, to make sure that it is understood that gender equality is not just a human right. This is about economic prosperity of the European Union, because as our roadmap for women's rights that has been recently adopted says, that we are talking about the trillions of euros when we are able to get the talents and skills of women and integrate them into economy, including in the farming sector and in the rural economy. So thank you very much, and I look forward to our exchanges and reflections, and I will take good notes that I will share with my hierarchy, and they will for sure inform the preparation of our generational renewal strategy and also our action on women in farming platform. Thank you very much for your attention.
Elena, thank you so much. And it's just wonderful to see the Commission driving this agenda forward. But I always say the Commission is a fantastic entity, but it has unbelievable people like Elena who drive this forward for so many women as well. So these individuals in the Commission like Elena who do this really are worth their weight in gold. So Elena, thank you so much as well. And thanks to the Commission. It's great to see a bright future coming forward in relation to this agenda. So thank you very, very much. And in relation to those, I suppose, those results that we have, we're going to start looking at some of those results from the FLIARA project now. And we're going to start with our own University of Galway, and we're going to start with the initial FLIARA framework. And I'm going to call on Aisling Murtagh from the University of Galway. And Aisling's going to look at the initial stages and the initial work of the FLIARA framework, and how this, I suppose, has started us to rethink the policy environment around rural and agricultural innovation. So I'm going to hand it over to Aisling.
Thank you very much, Maura. Good morning, everyone, and delighted to be here and to get a chance to share some of our findings from the FLIARA project. So hopefully, a few slides. Hopefully, you can see them there. So as Maura said, what we wanted to do with the University of Galway presentation, I suppose we have been at the centre of the FLIARA project in kicking it off and building the framework that sits around the project and steers it. So it's kind of the key ideas and knowledge base that we're working from. So I want to do two things today to kind of give you a bird's eye view of the framework, and through all the presentations you'll hear today, aspects of this framework will be clear in terms of sustainability in the case studies and the futures work. You'll hear more about that later. But one of our activities as well is around kind of policy benchmarking. So what I wanted to do is almost take our benchmarking activities as a case study, if we want to call it that, and think about our framework, what are kind of the key principles underpinning FLIARA, and how we might use that to rethink policy. So here you'll see, I guess, a map of I guess, the process of our framework. We started off and worked through this in kind of the first roughly a year and a half of the project, where we set out to understand what we know, what we need to know, what are the key ideas and concepts that can help us develop new knowledge that is key to understanding the barriers and the opportunities for women-led innovation in agriculture and rural areas. We also did some work in the early stages of the project to assess policy, understand the existing, I guess, the existing state of play in terms of policy development, and look at this question of benchmarking. So the framework is kind of underpinned by key ideas. Sustainability is key there. Ideas of resilience have been brought in alongside sustainability, but also I guess we have a number of perspectives in there. The idea that we live in kind of a gendered society, that all of this is embedded in the pathways and realities of rural areas. So there's a huge kind of complex, I guess, dynamic at work here that influences women being involved in innovation. And I guess we have this idea of an innovation journey there as well. So all of this kind of wider level society stuff is kind of embedded in reality, in women's experiences and kind of lived reality of being innovators or trying to overcome barriers to become involved. So this is kind of a whistle-stop tour of the framework, and it kind of runs through the project through work package 2, so our futures work, our case studies, work package 3, and also our policy activities. And we have five deliverables that if you want to take a deeper look at this, that are available on the FLIARA website. So to kind of move into what I wanted to kind of focus on today was our kind of work around benchmarking. So benchmarking is an activity that cuts across the FLIARA project. So we started in terms of trying to understand I suppose, the mechanics of benchmarking, what is done in terms of benchmarking more broadly and specifically in terms of policy in our building our framework. So we're at the stage now, we have kind of 2 benchmarking deliverables. One kind of developed our initial guidelines to help steer us coming out of kind of our review of existing knowledge and our review of existing kind of policies. And we've done some work quite recently along with our colleagues in economies to take this to another level. So I guess we have been bringing together some of the findings from case studies, some of the findings from our community of practice workshops that you'll hear more about later. And that has fed into our second benchmarking report. And I guess within that, what we have tried to do is come back to what exactly are the benchmarks. And I guess for us, we've kind of taken this question quite seriously, and it's why we, I guess, have a kind of phased approach to benchmarking and have those 3 deliverables that build up to our final benchmarking framework. And I guess benchmarking as well it's kind of a term we use quite widely and generally, but we kind of said, okay, can we get down to the nuts and bolts of this? What exactly do we mean? So, and I suppose a key important thing to think about when we think about benchmarking, it's kind of a criteria reference point that we want to measure progress against. So it's quite a serious thing to do. We almost need to know an awful lot before we can benchmark. We need to know, I guess, what are the good practices, and also what are the missing links in terms of policies. So in terms of our approach, what we have been trying to do in terms of that second benchmarking report is to pull together a key list of what are the potential criteria and what are the measures. We've very much focused on benchmarks in terms of what are the key really promising policy measures that exist potentially from what our cases are telling us and what the needs are. So we have a huge list of potential benchmarks, indicators, whatever we might want to call them. So I guess for us now, as you can hear from what I'm saying, we're in the middle of this work, and we're building what we might finally end up as a benchmarking framework. And within that second report that we've recently just finished along with economies, we've been very much asking ourselves as well, what is the framework that we want to benchmark within? And this is something that is very much informed by, I guess, the ideas and the conceptual framework that underpins FLIARA. So you'll see here quite different kind of potential avenues in policy, very much different policy domains here. So we have potentially issues around addressing social and cultural conditions. So potentially that goes back to issues around childcare, issues around rural services. So that's a particular, I suppose, as Alina pointed to, it's a particular national area of kind of policy action. But what we find as well, kind of two core potential parts of our framework will be this idea of strengthening women's role in the renewal of the rural and farm economy, and innovation and entrepreneurship as a key anchor within that. But what we're also very much is emerging within our finding is that the policy support system as it exists has a lot of promising measures, practices, projects, and that we have a lot kind of to learn from existing practice and potentially a lot to improve in terms of how the system works. So that's kind of a lot of high level stuff there, but as we get into other presentations, we'll see some of the specifics of the actual recommendations and findings that are coming out of FLIARA. So again, to dig into the benchmarking a little bit more, we've got to ask ourselves as well, if we're building this framework, what do we measure and why? So again, is there an underpinning kind of ethos within this? Is it sustainability? Is it that we need more measures that support women to become involved in sustainable innovation initiatives? So is it to support the ecological transition, climate change? So potentially we can put different emphases on different aspects of this framework. So we're asking ourselves, are all things equal? And again, all this is work that we're teasing through. We have a wide range of potential measures, and we're trying to piece together how we might do that. And just to kind of finish up, just to kind of dig in again into how we're working through this question of benchmarking, it can be something, I guess, like maybe you think about it like a tick box exercise that's I suppose represented here. It can be something quite simple that maybe is a tool, a quick, rapid tool, or it can be something much more complex, like the dynamic framework that I've presented. So I guess for us, we're kind of thinking, how can we present a range of tools from those aspects that we've already developed that different actors in the policy system could use? Scale and context are key. So I suppose targeted measures in terms of different legal frameworks, for example, in Finland, targeted measures are not so much permitted because of the gender equality legal system. So scale and context is key in terms of designing benchmarking frameworks. And particular policy domains need particular measures. So potentially we have an overarching framework that gets broken down and can be applied to agricultural policy versus the wider maybe rural development arena. So to finish up, as I suppose you've heard, this call to action is for ourselves as much as anything else, that we need to build a benchmarking framework that very much counts what counts. And we very much in our work so far in FLIARA, we feel there is potentially an improved role for benchmarking in this whole arena of gender mainstreaming. So there's a whole, I suppose, a gamut of methods and tools that can support gender mainstreaming, and we're asking ourselves, can benchmarking be improved in terms of one of these tools? And I guess key, and it's a point that's made a lot in relation to mainstreaming, that we need to build the institutional capacity around how we actually implement these kinds of evaluation of policy. So thanks very much, and any questions, please add them to the Slido. I hand back to Maura.
Excellent, Aisling. Aisling, thanks so much. And so much work has gone in here. And I suppose this process of comparing the performances right across Europe, comparing the performances in our own countries, really raises the question, and it raises the bar for what we need for women in rural areas and in agriculture. It asks those questions, it raises those questions that we all need answers. And I think a great piece of work there has been done via the FLIARA project. So again, thanks to Aisling and all of the people who have worked on that. Okay, we're going to go to our next element of finding in relation to the FLIARA project. And we're going to look at this stage at some future perspectives of empowering women for rural sustainability. And I'm going to call on Thomas Kumanen, professor from the University of Turku, who was, again, a hugely instrumental partner in the FLIARA project, who really looked at those foresight and trend analysis, an absolute expert in this area. We worked previously with Thomas in the ruralization project, and we carried on with those kind of processes in FLIARA because they were so successful in ruralization. We felt that they really could be done justice to women again in relation to the FLIARA project. And that's exactly what Thomas and his team and the FLIARA team have done. They've looked fantastically at this foresight and trend analysis. So I'm going to hand it over to Thomas to explain to us all about what was achieved.
Thank you, Maura. Can you see my screen? Oh, I can't share my screen for some reason.
Not yet.
Don't see it shared yet, Thomas. If you can't share it, Victor can come in.
Yes, maybe.
Do you want to try to share it again, or?
It seems not to work.
Okay, Victor, we might pop you in to share if that's okay. Victor is furiously looking in the background for Thomas's presentation. Yes, we have it. Excellent. Thank you, Victor.
Okay, thank you, Victor.
Thomas, you're able to see that, yeah?
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect.
So, good afternoon from Finland and Finland Futures Research Center at the University of Turku. And we are going to talk about the future for a short moment, and maybe Victor can show this next slide, please. Regarding the context and approach, we started thinking about the future from the perspective of sustainability. And as we all know, there are many kinds of sustainability problems in rural areas in different parts of Europe. And if we look at these problems, we can ask that, has any of these become resolved through any policies during the last decades, or are there kind of wicked problems that you can't pick out from the network of problems? And then we thought that maybe women could bring in some new perspectives, ideas, approaches, resolutions for these sustainability problems. And we took the future's perspective because all the choices that we make in the present will materialize in the future. So we applied the future's research perspective. And then the next one. Regarding the methodology, we had 3 steps. We started with the sustainability problems. We tried to get an idea of the diversity of the problems in different types of areas. Then we designed the visions that would remove these problems if the visions were realized. Then we asked what kinds of innovations are needed to realize the visions. And as the final step, we had a look what are the measures to promote women's contributions to these sustainability innovations that actually would remove or address the sustainability problems in different types of areas. Almost 600 stakeholders were involved in the process in various stages. And the next slide will show that we were working in 9 different regional contexts to observe the diversity of regions. Can you show this next slide, Victor? Yes. And to have relevance with the findings. So we have had regions from the north, from the south, from the east, from the west, and also from different types of rural areas. So we had rural areas close to city, we had rural villages, and we had remote rural areas, because we have learned that context has quite huge impacts on certain topics. And the next slide. Regarding the key findings, I think we can say that, well, we found out that women have both specific possibilities or strengths and specific obstacles in contributing to sustainability innovations. And of course, if you are designing a policy, for example, it would be wise or good to observe these problems and possibilities, and we have shown them in our reports. We also found out that the highest potential among women is in the contribution to social and environmental sustainability innovations, and most obstacles can be found in political and economic technological innovations. And again, this should be observed when we design policy, for example. Regarding the measures, not yet, sorry, too busy. Regarding the measures to promote women's contributions to these sustainability innovations, we found that social measures were considered more effective means than, let's say, traditional hard administrative or economic measures. And these measures ask for local design and delivery and a bottom-up approach to have these kind of social measures in use. We also found that sustainability problems were quite different between different types of rural areas, but the measures to promote women's contributions to sustainability innovations, there were no such striking differences between the regions. So you can take the portfolio of measures that we found and apply it across different regions quite well, even though the sustainability problems would be quite different. And now the next slide. Okay, if we look at the evidence we found, for example, regarding the possibilities or the strengths of women to contribute to sustainability innovations, women have extensive networks, they have good educational background, they appreciate soft and social values, they have good ground level knowledge, for example, positive attitude for change and novelty. This was the contribution of our stakeholders. And of course, if you think that, well, we found that they have more possibilities to contribute to social and environmental innovations, well, this is one of the reasons, of course. And then when we found that they have more challenges in contributing to economic and technological and political innovations, and you look at the list of obstacles, you found that there's no lack there's no demand for novel practices, there's lack of equality, lack of capital, lack of certain types, for example, political networks or economic networks, lack of courage, risk-taking. These kinds of topics explain partly why women have more obstacles in contributing to political and economic sustainability innovations. And then the next slide. Then we come to the measures to promote women's contributions. Our stakeholder group promoted 333 measures, and we made broader categories out of them. And we can see that if we still take higher level of abstraction and have only two categories like social measures and administrative and economic measures, we can say that 80% of the proposed measures were social in character and only 20% were administrative and economic measures. And at the top of the list, for example, platforms for co-creation and cooperation, alternatives, examples, good practices, education, equality, vision-based actions, empowerment, place-based policies, and so on. So quite many of the most common measures that came out were social in character. Yes, the next one. If we again take a bit higher level of abstraction with the measures, with the 18 measures, we can have 4 categories like networks, prerequisites, knowledge, and incentives. And when we look at the different types of rural areas, you can see that the differences are not that striking. In all kinds of areas, the networks are the most important. Maybe in remote rural areas, incentives and knowledge are a bit more important than in the other types of rural areas, but no striking differences in the measures, for example, by type of the area. And then the next one, and this is the last one, so we can maybe conclude that the social measures and a bottom-up approach are the keys for exploiting women's strengths in resolving rural sustainability problems. And if we want to get a higher contribution to the more challenging political and economic innovations that are, of course, also needed to remove the sustainability problems, we should focus on removal of the obstacles that were listed in the previous slides. And of course, disregarding the rural context, the mix of measures was quite similar. So we can take the list and see what we can do disregarding the region, disregarding the problem, and networks, of course, are the most important. And it's logical because all the innovations take place in networks. You can make an invention alone, but you cannot make an innovation alone. And of course, you can submit your ideas, questions, and comments through Slido. Thank you.
Excellent, Thomas. Thank you so much. I think as we can see there are possibilities that we can exploit and in many ways obstacles that we can remove, and a huge amount of work done there. And those measures that are there as well, 333 measures that can be used to promote women's contribution to rural sustainability, looking at all of those, examining all of those in each country, in each policy, and making sure that we're looking at those to ensure the directions that we're taking in policy are correct. So some wonderful work there, again carried out by Thomas's team in the FLIARA project, but also all of the FLIARA partners were involved in this work, as Thomas said, right across 9 regions, right across Europe. So thank you very, very much, Thomas, for that work. Okay, we're going to move at this stage slightly past, and I suppose our whole idea today was very much, now we've got 2 interactive panels, so there'll be more talking in those, but today it was very much giving you a feel for what the FLIARA project has discovered, but also what other people are doing, the work that other people are doing as well out there and across Europe and across the world to ensure, I suppose, that gender equality. So our next speaker, we're absolutely delighted to call on and to have Alexandra Kozenska with us this morning. And Alexandra comes from she's a partner at the Gender Solutions Group, and she's going to look at empowering women innovation in agri-food. So we're absolutely delighted to have you, Alexandra, and to hear your aspects of this topic.
Thanks a lot, Maura. I will share my slides, and at first I would like to say that I'm absolutely amazed with the number of people that we have here today. It's over 130, and I think it's the topic of women innovators in agri-food is becoming more and more important thanks to policymakers like Elena and other people in DG Agri that are pushing this topic forward, but also the academic network of people like you, Maura, your team, and the University of Turkey and other partners, but also organizations that are really supporting this transition to have more women among the innovators in the agri-food sector. And one of them, a very important one, is EIT Food. I've been collaborating with them for a while. You will hear about some projects they do, like empowering women in agri-food, I'm sure, throughout this webinar. But I would like to drag your attention to the research that I did with Christian Gauthier on the measures that are empowering women innovators in the agri-food sector in Central and Eastern Europe. We looked at 15 countries from this region and analyzed over 130 programs that are supporting either female entrepreneurs or agri-food entrepreneurs to understand which elements of the programs are working best, and to design guidelines for program support that will be really actively and efficiently supporting women innovators. If you're interested, I'm sharing that in the chat so that you can have a look. Oh, I cannot share it now, but after my presentation, I'll do that. But here are some of the main insights from this research. So maybe first thing, why we decided to look at innovation and gender equality, because it's not like the self-explanatory connection for many of people, and but there is actually a big correlation between the regions in Europe that are gender equal and also more innovative. If you have a look at those two maps here, on one hand we have the Female Achievement Index by the Joint Research Center, that is measuring the level of gender equality in various regions across Europe. And on the other hand, the European Innovation Scoreboard map that is assessing the level of innovation in different countries in the European Union. And you can see that those countries are in the light green on the left-hand side are those that are less innovative, less gender equal. While at the same time, those that are in orange and yellow on the other map are less innovative. We call them modest to moderate innovators. So these are mostly Central Eastern European countries. This is why we focused on that region, but also southern countries like Greece, Italy, and Spain, Portugal. And we cannot say that there is a straightforward cause-effect connection, but we can see that there is a correlation. We can say that that those regions and countries that are more gender equal tend to be more innovative. So it is an absolute prerequisite for innovation to also support gender equality. And why is it important, especially in the agri-food sector? Because those gender gaps there are really amazingly big. I mean, if we look at the rural areas and the number of farm managers that are women, we can see that in 2020, this is the latest data from Eurostat, the share of farm managers that are women was only a little bit above 30%. And that means that throughout 15 years from 2005, the increase was just by 5 percentage points. It's not really a big increase around the 15 years time span. Of course, there are differences between countries. I won't get into that because I have just 10 minutes, but you can have a look at the report. Depending on the type of the structure of farms in different regions, this can differ. For example, when we have smaller farms like Lithuania, Latvia, the number of women is higher among farm managers, while in the countries with bigger types of farms, it's just 10%, like Germany, for example. The other part of the equation when we think about agri-food innovation ecosystem is obviously deep tech, startups, and this whole world of innovators. And here, women again are much less represented. Here we have more recent data. The EIT data from 2024 shows that the percentage of total funding going to deep tech startups with women founders in Europe stands at only 11%. And at the same time, the seed stage of women-led startups secure only 15% of funding. But when we look at very particular field of agri-tech startups, so we connect agri-food and innovation field, not a good news, unfortunately. It's even worse. We have data from PitchBook 2024, and they share that exclusively women-funded agtech firms made up around 3% of global agtech VC deal activity. And all female founded, so only female led startups made up less than 1% of this activity. So we have a big field to work on to equalize chances of women and men, especially that we know that women are very active in this area, and we'll hear about it throughout this webinar for sure. Why is it so? So there are many reasons for that, the social, cultural reasons, etc. But in our research, we focused on two very important ones that were already mentioned today as well: policymaking and funding. On one hand, we see that policymakers tend not to touch this topic. Well, we've heard that in the CAP 2023, there was for the first time the objective to support women in rural areas, which having in mind that gender equality measures were very active from the 1990s, 1980s, it seems that it's a very short time that the Commission was really taking into account this women perspective in terms of policymaking around agri-food. It's great that we start to do that, but we know that there's a lot to do in this area. Especially at the regional level, because often policymakers tend not to make interventions in the areas where they cannot show the success. And success can be shown if we have data. And there is still not enough data about women in the agri-food sector. So many of the innovation agencies in various regions prefer to work on women in STEM, women in healthcare, in the areas where we have more data to be able to show the progress or to be able to show how the intervention really worked for the community. So first, we have to address the data gap so that we can then address the policymaking gap. And then another element is funding. It is always an issue, of course, but for women in agri-food is specifically hard because first we have much less investment in women-led startups regardless of the sector. And in terms of agri-food and food tech, it is very hard to find investors in general, even if you're a man founder, because those investments are much more time consuming. You can imagine a person designing innovation in terms of digital app in a garage, but it's hard to imagine someone doing innovations in terms of new food products or farming solutions just out of their home. You have to have big investments in terms of the operations, in terms of ingredients, in terms of certification processes, and that all is money and time consuming. So it is much harder for innovators in this area to show actual market connection and the consumers' value for the investors to be able to attract the funding. And if you're a woman innovator in this field, it's even harder. So there are many programs that are trying to fulfill this gap, and we, as said, analyzed 130 of them, over 130. There is a it's kind of a trend that those that are supporting female entrepreneurs, regardless of the sector, are more focused on skills, upskilling women, which is funny because women are usually more educated, but that's how it works. And those that are working with women and men are more focused on acceleration incubators. So they're already bringing access to markets. They are connecting with some export partners. They're much more hands-on, I would say. And among all those 134 programs we analyzed, there were only 10 that were specifically supporting women in agri-food. So we see that still there is a big gap here. And why this gap is even more important to fill is that we know that there's a lot of women that prefer to start their entrepreneurial journey or their innovation journey in a safe space where they can share with other women and feel secure and heard. There are many women who are fine with having a co-educational programs, the typical startup incubators that are offered all over Europe, but there is also a big chunk of them who prefer to be in women-only programs, and it is important to give choice to women to be able to either go into one or another. And my last slide, I promise, is about the success factors. So what really worked for supporting female entrepreneurs in agri-food. So we talked about many challenges. We have women-related challenges, entrepreneurial challenges, rural challenges, but what can really work? One is flexibility. So really addressing needs and personalized approach to the program that women can really participate in them on their own rules. Especially it is important in terms of family obligations and childcare, given the intergenerational approach of the Commission that we've heard at the beginning. The elderly care is also becoming more and more important here. It is about creating community. We've heard about that as well from Thomas. It is important, so mentoring and having great role models, but also alumni. So women that are in the similar stage of their entrepreneurial journey. And funding, as always, a big issue. So I hope I didn't over talk. And if you have any questions, feel free.
Alexandra, thank you so much. All of this research that's been done additional to the FLIARA project and of course our sister projects as well, funded by the European Commission, really adds so much to the agenda, and particularly here, this focus on agri-food adds so much as well. So we're delighted to have you, and thank you so much for adding all of that material. We're going to move to our first panel of the morning before we have a break, a very short break. And I'm going to call on my colleague in Galway, Aisling Murtagh, and Aisling is going to moderate the first panel for us. So we're going to call on Aisling to introduce the panel that are on this, that are going to speak at this stage.
Thanks very much, Maura, and great to step in here and to facilitate this discussion with a diverse range of panelists. So we're going to focus on kind of the theme of breaking barriers to women-led innovation for the next short while. And we're delighted to welcome 5 panelists here today. We have Graham Dean, who is project coordinator with one of our sister projects, the SWIFT project. We have Sasha Krizik, who is one of our ambassadors, and Sasha has an enterprise that is focused on microgreens. We are delighted to welcome Alicia Krakowska, who is project manager at EU-funded on the program Empowering Women in Agri-Food. Mariana Bicheri, who is gender officer for Europe and Central Asia at the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, and Maura Farrell, our coordinator, will join us here as well. So apologies there for some pronunciation errors, I'm sure, but we'll work away. So I might just go to Mariana to start with, and just to get your reflections in terms of your perspective how would you say local communities, governments, and international organisations can help challenge gender stereotypes and support women engaged in rural and farm innovation?
Okay, so thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. And let's think about stereotypes. If we truly want to support rural women to realize their full potential as farmers, innovators, it is critical to challenge gender stereotypes, such as the belief that women are primarily mothers, that they don't participate in decision-making, that they are not farmers on their own right, but merely the farmer's wife. So, to break down these stereotypes, we must transform the systems that underpin them and address the root causes of gender inequality. This is where gender transformative approaches are essential. These approaches work across all levels, individual, household, community, policy institutions, to create an enabling environment where gender equality can flourish. This includes, for instance, target awareness-raising campaigns that highlight the economic and social benefits of gender equality, equal labor distribution, women's leadership, and how all that contribute to productivity, resilience, and rural development. And it's very important that these efforts involve men in all levels, because this way we can have a broader cultural shift. And everybody has a role to play: communities, government, international organizations. So going into the questions at local level, communities, it is critical that we start shifting discriminatory gender roles and social norms. For instance, we had a project in a country in the region where women received rural advisory support and were given machinery that could greatly reduce their work burden, but they chose not to use this equipment because operating machinery was socially perceived as men's task, not theirs. So to challenge these deeply rooted beliefs, it is critical to engage both women and men in community dialogues. These conversations can help shifting stereotypes, build a shared vision about what women and men can and cannot do, and also support a thinking that some tasks traditionally assigned to men can shift and vice versa. And of course, while certain roles may continue to differ when it comes to innovation, technology, or machinery that can help improve lives, it is vital to question whether some cultural values, social norms defining what men and women can do are still valid, or whether they can evolve. And also thinking about community perspectives, it's critical to reduce paid care burden. Rural women spend disproportionate time in childcare and household responsibilities. So solutions like community-led solutions like childcare cooperatives and time-saving infrastructures could be extremely helpful and part of the answer. And then thinking about governments, meanwhile, they should invest in gender-responsive policies that remove structural barriers, and policies should embed gender transformative principles like tackling power imbalances, promoting shared decision-making, supporting women's agents, not just their participation in programs. And finally, when it comes to international organizations, we have a key role to play in generating knowledge for evidence-based policy dialogue, supporting the development of gender-responsive policies, and ensuring that programs are in place to support rural communities, particularly women. We also must to invest in sex disaggregated data and evidence, because what we don't measure, we cannot improve. And it's critical to address the continuing visibility of rural women in agricultural policy and programming. So to conclude, from local communities to global institutions, we all have a role to play, transforming gender relations and challenging negative gender stereotypes. So let's foster gender transformative approach and invest in women, not only as beneficiaries, but agents of change, leaders, scientists, farmers, and innovators. I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mariana. That was it's such a, I suppose, one of those deep and cross-cutting, and as you illustrate, action is needed at so many levels and a diversity of interventions. It's one of those kind of wicked issues is very, and I suppose that's why we're still talking about it for such a long time. So thank you, Mariana. And I'll call on Graham now from the SWIFT project. From your perspective, have you witnessed any progress in breaking down barriers for women-led innovation in agriculture and rural areas? If you see any particularly promising activities in this area?
Hi, Ashley. Thank you for inviting me and allowing me to speak. First of all, I would like to say that the creation of SWIFT and FLIARA and grass ceilings by themselves, I think, can be seen as a way of answering this question, because these projects have been funded specifically to break down these barriers for women innovations in agriculture and rural areas. So I think just the fact that these projects exist is proof that there is motivation and innovation and desire to tackle these problems. And I don't think that can be understated. From the point of SWIFT specifically, we have seen a lot of work, for example, in feminist farm viability work, where there are researchers in our project working specifically in Spain who are trying to analyze things from a feminist perspective as opposed to a gender perspective specifically. And they are trying to develop an assessment tool specifically to contribute to women-led innovations, identifying and visualizing their time use strategies to help them with internal organization and how their time use strategies impact the viability of their projects. In this case, their farms and I think that's important work. It's been done a lot by the University of Vic here in Barcelona. So it's involved an awful lot of in-depth work on farm interviews, and it's been an ongoing process, and it's a really incredible work for addressing these problems and addressing the barriers and breaking them down, especially with female farmers and women-led innovations in Spain. Another thing that SWIFT has done quite extensively is it has looked at policy gender mainstreaming, and it has identified a lot of gaps and blind spots within policies. This work was done a lot by our partners both in Oxfam and the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands, and they have seen that there's an inconsistency among policymakers on how these policies align with each other, which has caused a lot of problems.
Just a moment there. I don't know if people are having trouble hearing Graham. I don't know if you have your microphone is possible. Are people hearing Graham okay? I just see some comments in the chat. No, we're okay. It's okay. Maybe.
Okay. I turned my microphone.
Sorry, Graham.
My microphone up if that helps.
Yep.
So yeah, there has also been found for policy. I'm speaking now directly of Louise's work, who's kind of talking in the comments. So I better be careful. That the EU has failed to adequately recognize the differences in the way women farm and experience farming as compared to male farmers. So I think addressing these differences and addressing these problems is breaking down the barriers to women-led innovations in agriculture in general, but obviously we have an EU focus. And I have to say as well that in SWIFT, and I know in FLIARA as well, there is a huge emphasis on the co-production of knowledge, using the experiences of female farmers and women-led innovations to help develop and guide the projects. So I think these concepts and this perception of bottom down co-production is really essential for breaking down the barriers for innovation in agriculture and rural development for women. So I think these are the huge ones, combined with action research and participatory research, which I know that FLIARA, grass ceiling, and SWIFT all really work within.
Yeah.
In
Perfect. Yeah. No, like I think what yourself and Mariana are saying, it's there's a lot of common strands there. We need kind of so many different types of approaches, and the fact that we have these sister projects, Grass Sealing, SWIFT and FLIARA is, we're all going to add to the research and knowledge. And Graham, some people are wondering, could you remind us what SWIFT stands for? Oh,
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I had a PowerPoint made, so I'm just kind of supporting women-led innovations in farming and rural territories is what SWIFT stands for. I'm sorry I didn't say it at the start. I have the PowerPoint set up and then I just forgot to share it. So yeah,
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. I might move on to Alicia just for a moment. And in your experience, you have a lot of experience with training programs. What would you say are the types of training programs, we've heard a little bit about this already, are most effective in empowering and helping women to lead innovations in agriculture and rural areas?
Thank you so much. So speaking from my perspective, I'm coordinating the EVA program, so Empowering Women in Agri-Food. When I think about what really works, it's clear that the training programs need to do more than just check boxes, basically. So they have to be comprehensive, they have to be accessible, and most importantly, what was already said by Alexandra before, they need to be tailored to the real needs of women entrepreneurs. So women need support that speaks directly to their business realities. So depending, even it's like training in business development or how to pitch ideas or understanding finances or how to use digital tools. This is especially important, I think, in terms of rural areas where access to business knowledge and digital know-how not always is, but might be limited. And speaking from EVA perspective, I think it's a really great example when it comes to creating a personalized experience. So we accept 10 mentees per country, which means each of them receives individual attention and support tailored to their actual needs. We also offer personalized one-to-one mentoring that gives them access to industry experts, but also to successful entrepreneurs like EVA alumni, who can actually guide them and boost their motivation and confidence, and also share some insight into already existing market. What we noticed is that the strong peer networks is really, really beneficial here. So we create this sense of community, this safe space for others to share their knowledge for growth. Another strand that I would like to mention here is that such training programs must include diverse range of participants. So in terms of, for example, EVA, we support over 100 women in each year. This year, for example, we support 130 women from 13 different European countries. And we have a wide range of participants from those who joined us only with a business idea to those already running early stage startups and also, of course, farmers. And we think that this mix actually creates a great environment for collaboration, inspiration, and knowledge exchange. I think it's one more thing that is also very important is the language and accessibility. I think many programs fall short here because they overlook the language barriers. The EVA program is implemented in local languages, which makes it much more inclusive and easier for women to fully engage. But we are also aware that some of the more advanced accelerator programs are held in English. We have also noticed from our monitoring processes that it's actually needed for these women. So we introduced a tailored business English course that can help them improve their pitching skills and how to communicate in global markets. And of course, a big thing also in this kind of programs is financial support. As already mentioned before, Women often combine not only businesses, but also caregiving, family responsibilities. So, for example, in case of Eva, we offer a small financial support to each of our participants that can be used for child support, to travel accommodation. So everyone is included in all Eva activities. And one big thing also is the flexibility, as already mentioned by Alexandra in her presentation. So especially for women in rural areas, the flexibility is the key in terms of this training programs. So providing possibility to join the training online or in hybrid modes helps them and ensure that they can actually fit there in the schedules.
Brilliant,
So
Alicia. Yeah,
I would say this.
yeah.
Okay.
No, it's amazing when you hear of your program. We would love if we had similar in all countries, that the outreach was even bigger, and the fact that they're tailored to key needs. I suppose that's a key issue that we see coming out of FLIARA as well. So it's amazing to hear about the program. I might move to Sasha now, who's one of our FLIARA ambassadors. And can I ask you, Sasha, from your experience, I suppose you're an entrepreneur, an innovator. How can governments or organizations better support networking opportunities? From your experience, is there any good experiences or gaps that you see?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of this important discussion. I will focus today on funding, because this is for us right now a pain point. And as also Alexandra said, so I'm here today as a woman who lives and works in a rural area, not just as an observer of change, but as a driver of it. So every day we innovate and find new ways to grow food, feed community, build social bonds, and create economic opportunities, and often with limited support. So, but despite this creativity and resilience, many of us still face systematic barriers when it comes to recognition, funding, and access to decision making. So I believe it's time to change that. One of the biggest barriers for women innovators in farming and rural areas is access to funding, especially for the smaller ones like we are. The current system often expects individuals to first invest their own time, resources, and energy, and only then apply for funding to continue or scale their work. So this approach is not only, I think, unfair, it's also deeply discouraging, especially for those who innovate in under-resourced rural communities. And for innovators especially, we are often not traditional enough. We don't fit into predefined categories or sectors, and as a result, we fall through the cracks of public tenders and funding calls. So this issue starts early, already at the level of ministries and institutions, when sectors are defined and support structures are designed. If innovation doesn't have a clear label, it's often invisible or unsupported. So I believe it's time to reverse this logic of funding. Instead of asking us to prove ourselves before we receive some support, funding mechanisms should allow us to start with trust, seed capital, and tailored guidelines. We should be given the tools, trust, and resources first, so we can build, test, and grow our ideas without a lot of heavy bureaucratic burden upfront. So I think all processes must be simplified. At the moment, many applications are so complex that they require expert-level knowledge or outside consultants. This excludes exactly the people we are trying to empower, so women with deep knowledge of their land, their traditions, and their local networks. Women with powerful and practical ideas are being left out. So we can't be expected to prove our worth without support. Innovation doesn't happen because of resilience alone. It happens when someone gives us the opportunity to act. What we need is more proof of our potential. We always show that every day. We don't want handouts. We want fair opportunities to bring our ideas to life and contribute to the future of our rural communities. And for that, we need policies and systems that understands how we work. Innovation doesn't always look like a business plan. Sometimes it looks like community resilience, like care for land and people, like rethinking old systems that deserve support too. So this will be my part of looking how funding is.
Yeah, that's some absolutely critical and kind of key and priority. I don't know how many words we can put on it. Messages there for policy, and I think we see those messages, have seen them coming out very strongly in the project more widely as well. But absolutely critical. Funding is kind of at the top of the list in terms of, and the logic that underpins it. It's not just about availability of certain kinds of grants. It's that they're meeting the needs and supporting people to take steps. So I know we're kind of eating into the coffee break time here, and I might just pass over to Maura for some final thoughts, if in the context of the project, if there's any key points that you want to highlight from what we've discussed.
Yeah, absolutely, Aisling, and thanks so much to everybody. I think the ideas, the notions are very much reflective of what we've been finding in FLIARA. And I think that idea of the stereotyping was exactly what we had found from the word go. Let it be via our knowledge review, let it be via our case studies, let it be anything on the ground. That idea of us needing to challenge those stereotypes was exactly what we had found as well. That idea of sharing the knowledge, I think, first of all, as Graham said, between the different projects that are there, the European Commission have, for the first time, I think, forever, I think, funded these gender projects that are out there, rural gender projects. And I think we have really brought to the fore exactly the issues. And I suppose the co-creation of the knowledge with the women on the ground is really what's interesting as well. We've listened to them. We've listened to what they have said. We're bringing forward their voice. This is not our information. This is theirs. And we're bringing that forward. I think the training was something in FLIARA we also came forward very, very strongly. And I think flexibility was a lovely word Alicia said. The flexibility of the training, making sure that the training is suited for what the women want. Let's not just keep producing training models that are not what women want, making sure that those are flexible models. I think that was really important as well. I think the funding, all of what Sasha has said, that's exactly why I think we have picked Sasha as one of our FLIARA ambassadors, because we visited her in Slovenia and she spoke such wonderful ideas and inspirational thoughts around what the women were needed and what the women were thinking. I think one word really resonated with me there: trust. Trust these women. Trust these women that these women can do a really, really good job. Do not kind of put barriers and obstacles in their way. Trust that what they can do, not just add value to their farm, but add value to a community. And I think if we have that trust in policy and allow these women to bring forward that, I think we will have a much better scenario going forward. So I think all of what has been said resonates very much with what FLIARA has found. So thank you very much in that sense.
Brilliant. Thanks, Maura. I think, thanks to everyone. Thanks to Mariana, Alicia, Sasha, and Graham. I think everything just echoes what we have found. And the key thing, I think, if I was to take away anything, is that we need action on so many different levels, but there are still kind of priorities for now and priorities for maybe a little bit later. And the design of policy is key as well. That it's not just about simple solutions. Tailored solutions are key, from the training to the funding. So I'll hand back to Maura now. So I think we're
perfect.
Thanks everyone.
Perfect. Aisling, thank you so much. And on that, we're going to take a little break. We have Ilaria Sittu coming up immediately after the break, but I think we're going to take a 5-minute break. I think we had 10 minutes, but just to keep us on track and time, we're going to take a 5-minute break. So if everybody come back again at past, which I think is about 5 minutes, and that would be wonderful. And we're gone over 140 something people on board at the moment, which is fantastic. So if you can all come back in again in 5 minutes. Thank you. Larry, I'm just going to introduce you. And we're absolutely delighted to have you. And you're going to talk a little bit on the status of women in the agri-food sector. And Ilaria Sipto is here today with us from the international perspectives, from the she's a Gender and Development Officer with the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, the FAO, as we all may know it. Quite familiar with it. And we're delighted that you're here with us today to give us, I suppose, a broader, more international perspective, and we're delighted to have you. Ilaria, thank you very much. We'll let you take over.
Oh, thank you very much to the organizer and to FLIARA for this opportunity. I was extremely interested in hearing the different presenters before, and I really learned a lot. In my presentation, I would like to explain how we can actually overcome the barriers to the empowerment of women in rural areas and what actually we can do. I don't know, can you see my second slide?
Perfect.
In my presentation, I want to focus on 4 different aspects. First, explain what is the status of women in agri-food system. Then explain what kind of approaches we are taking, give you some examples of our work, and also conclude with one slide with some recommendations for the best way forward for closing the gender gap in agri-food system. So we published recently this report on the status of women in agri-food system that provides a comprehensive global view of the status of women. And it's not only considering agriculture like we did in 2012 when we published the first report on the status of women in agriculture, but we really wanted to consider both on-farm and off-farm work. And we wanted also to see how the different segments of the agri-food system are affected by different structural inequalities, and also see what is the current situation at global level. So first of all, as you can see, the agri-food system are a major employer of women and men. The data of 2019 show that 36% of working women were employed in agri-food system, along with 38% of working men. And this was representing 8 percentage point decrease from 2005. Also, if we look at the data that we analyze over 2 years process involving over 100 people, and this is reflected in the report, we have seen that agri-food systems are a greater source of livelihood for women than for men, especially in low and middle income countries. And in the case, for example, of sub-Saharan Africa, women represent 66%. The report is available online and people are encouraged to read it. It's our business case, if you want to call it like that. If we look at the working condition of women in agri-food system, we see that they are having more vulnerable jobs because their jobs very often are irregular, they're informal, very often they are part-time, they are low skills, and they can also be labor intensive. And so even though women play a very important role in agri-food system, which represent a major source of livelihoods and welfare for women and their community, their condition, the working condition, are still very marginalized and more vulnerable. If you look at the data, we have seen, for example, that in Africa, more than 80% of the employed women and men work in vulnerable self-employment activities in agriculture. If you look in off-farm agriculture, agri-food system employment, that implies processing, marketing, and so on. In case of Africa, only 14% of the women work for wages or salary compared to 39%. So the situation is still pretty dramatic. Also, we have seen that the remuneration of women is still lower. On average, women earn globally 82 cents for every dollar they're earned by men in wage employment in agriculture. Also, there is a big issue related to the gap in land productivity between female and male managed farms of the same size, and the gap has been measured 24%. And so women are still facing a lot of discrimination. Also, if you look at the time spent by women on unpaid domestic and care work, on average, women spend 4.2 hours a day, while men only 1.9 hours. So there is also a big issue that we have to take into account. Women very often, if we look at the gender gaps in agriculture and agri-food system, we realize there are still major gaps between men and women. And for example, women still have less access to extension, to irrigation, to ownership of land, livestock, and very little progress has actually been made. And so there are still huge gaps in terms of accessing land, input services. We have made some progress in terms of having more access to finance and digital technology and mobile for women, but the gap is still pretty alarming, unfortunately. We are also working with about 46 countries measuring the ownership of land. And we have seen that in 40 out of 46 countries, men have greater ownership of land. And in the case of Africa, for example, 26 out of 31. Also, we have seen that the protection of women land rights are low in 50% of the country. And while, as I mentioned before, the gap in terms of having more access to mobile and internet has been reduced, and now it's been narrowed from 25 to 16%. These I just mentioned. Why is all this situation? This is mainly linked also to discriminatory social norms and rules that are affecting especially women and girls, and these are the heart of the gender inequality. We know that these social norms are very slow to change. For example, there's still globally the perception that if women are working, the children will suffer, or that wife beating remains acceptable in many countries. And we have seen that we have analyzed a huge number of policy documents related to the agri-food system, and we have seen that about 75% have recognized the challenge of women. But when we see how many of these policies have actually been translated into specific goals related to gender, the number goes down and it's only about 19%. So as you can see, the situation is still not very good. Also, if we look at the data, by increasing gender equality, women's empowerment is essential for the well-being of women and also of their family. And this can really produce, according to the data, an increase in agricultural production, can improve the food security, can improve child nutrition. And so by addressing the gender gap, it's not only being nice to women, but we are really nice to the whole households and the whole community and the economy and the society as a whole. Also, we have seen that the laws on women's participation in business are improving globally. And this is according to the OECD Social Institution and Gender Index. So at least this is a very positive issue that things are really slowly being addressed more. We also need to consider what is the resilience to shocks and what are the coping mechanisms of men and women when there are shocks or stressors. They're very also affected by gender inequalities. If we look, for example, at the COVID, we analyze all the data and we realize that in 2019, after the pandemic, 22% of the women lost their jobs in off-farm agri-food system work in the first year of the pandemic, compared to only 2% of men. And also we have seen that the gap between men and women's food insecurity has widened from 1.9 to 3.7 point between 2019 and 2021. Luckily, the situation now is getting slightly better again. What we need to do, we have seen, as other people have also mentioned before, we really need to see that we adopt as much as possible gender transformative approaches that can be really very cost effective and can really help in addressing these discriminatory norms at local level. And this is also what my colleague Mariana has also highlighted. We really need to invest much more in closing the gaps in land tenure, because this can really produce benefits in terms of employment, investment, in the management of resources and services and so on. We need to provide access to formal childcare so that women can be released from some of the care work and can have more opportunity for work and be involved more in agri-food system. We have seen that group-based approaches are very important for increasing the empowerment and the resilience. And we really need to also invest much more in social protection, because these can also have very positive impacts on terms of women's employment and enhance their resilience. What kind of approach are we taking? First, we are talking about gender mainstreaming, and that's the process when you want to assess what are the impacts of all action, including legislation, policies, and programs on men and women. And this is when you really address this gender issue from the original design of your project throughout the final evaluation. And you want to see how actually men and women are benefiting from your intervention, and what can actually be done to reduce and eliminate any form of inequality. And the final objective is to achieve equality between men and women, and also close the gap that still exists between them. So we started by being unaware of gender issue. Some people talk about being gender blind, but we try to avoid that term. Then to move towards gender sensitive, when you try to recognize and try to address some of the gender issue. We move towards more a gender responsive approach, when you try to take specific measure to address the gender roles and the needs of men and women. And now we are moving more towards gender transformative. And that means that you really want to address the underlying causes of inequalities and what is blocking women's empowerment. There's a difference between gender equality and equity, and gender equality is when men and women enjoy equal rights, opportunities, and entitlements in the civil and political life. And this doesn't mean that all the women have the same needs, but that you address their specific needs. In gender equity, we still have to do a lot, because very often you need affirmative action to eliminate all possible obstacle and structural barriers, so that then they can equally benefit in the future. We're also working a lot in our policy on gender equality towards women's empowerment, and that means that you really need to promote economic advancement, you need to increase their power and agency, and this implies to invest in their capability, invest in their negotiation and leadership skills, and build their self-confidence, in addition to giving them access to productive resources like assets, financial and agricultural services, and so on. Also, we have to consider more and more intersectionality, because we know that very often gender overlaps with other issues related, for example, to age, to ethnicity, disability status, and the sexual orientation, and other issues. And so all these aspects also need to be very well taken into account. Inclusivity, our work is guided by Leave No One Behind, so we need to make sure that all people, irrespective of their age, sex, or disability, or race, can equally benefit from our intervention. And for our work, we are mostly focusing on the poor, extreme poor, the most marginalized and food insecure people. And this mainly involves small-scale producer, family farmers, and everyone who is involved in agri-food system. Our Director General, to say what we are doing towards gender equality, has launched last year. This initiative is called Commit to Grow Equality, based on the report on the status of women in agri-food system, that tries to really enhance gender equality and women's empowerment through financing and partnership. And our role is to bring together all the different stakeholders who want to commit investment and partnership to make the agri-food system work better. And this is really the first initiative that tries to spotlight directly into women's role in agri-food system, and tries to make gender equality and women's empowerment as a key objective of any type of investment and policy. Also, after a long negotiation process, finally the Committee on Food Security has approved voluntary guidelines on gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. And this is, we provide guidance to plan gender responsive public policy, programs, and innovative solutions. And possible action could be, for example, improving the legal and the policy framework, looking into institutional mechanisms, establishing innovative partnership, and try to see what kind of resources are needed. Also, this year we decided that the celebration for International Women's Day was dedicated for all women and girls, rights, equality, and empowerment. And this is giving a vision also on empowering youth, particularly young women and adolescent women who can be catalysts for lasting change. FAO has been called by the United Nations Assembly to lead the planning for 2016 of the International Year of the Women Farmer, where in collaboration with governments, other UN agencies, international and regional organizations, we will be leading a one-year celebration that will be launched at the end of this year. And the idea is to raise awareness on the roles of women farmers. We want to highlight action to close the gender gap and also provide guidance for policy making. And to conclude, I would like just to say that, as stated also in the report on the status of women in agri-food system, it is essential that we invest in high quality data and research so that we consider not only gender, but also other social and economic differentiation, that we need to see how we can upscale successful approaches that can help closing the asset and resource gap. And this can really have a very beneficial benefit by increasing the global GDP by 1% and provide food security for 45 million, according to our estimates. And also make sure that in the intervention are intentional and transformative, so that you can really increase the income of another 58 million people and the resilience of another 235 million people. Thank you for your kind attention.
Ilaria, thank you so much. There's so much there, I think, that resonates with the work that we've done in FLIARA, with the other work that has been done right across Europe. And I know your concentration is on more kind of poor, insecure people. But I think so many of the issues that you have spoken about are issues that are still very much impacting women in rural areas across farms and across innovative or situations right across Europe. So I think so many of the ideas are still the same. So many of the challenges are still the same. So I think it brings a great additional element to, I suppose, the research, to the work that you guys are doing, the work that can be, I suppose, we can collaborate on. So thank you so much for that. Real inspirational ideas coming from there. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to share this.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you. Thank you very much. We're going to move slightly back again to our own FLIARA team, and we're going to move back again to some of the work that has been carried out again on the FLIARA project. And at this stage, I'm going to look at maybe that work package that looked at the case study work that was carried out on FLIARA. And we've got two people who were very much in charge of this. Annie Rue, who is from our Swedish university, and Silvia Savini, who is from the university in Italy, in Calabria. So we're delighted to have both of them, of Annie and Silvia, with us now to talk us through some of the work that was carried out in relation to the case studies on the FLIARA project. Annie, I think we're going to start with you.
Yes, thank you, Maura. Yes, good. And I will also just make sure that Silvia is able to fix the screen like that. Okay. Yes, thank you, Maura. Silvia and I will present the lessons learned from the interviews the project has done with women innovators across European Union. And traditionally and presently, women's employment opportunities and contribution to innovation has been overshadowed and often even suppressed by, for example, patriarchal ethos. And we see deep-rooted inequalities and biases that persist in rural and farming communities. So FLIARA responded to this inequality by improving our understanding and recognition of women's role in promoting sustainable innovation in rural areas and farming. And put simply, if we know the pathway of those succeeding, we can push for enabling mechanism for further women-led innovation in rural areas and farming. So how did we go about to understand these pathways better? We started by making an inventory of women-led innovations across 10 European countries. It includes businesses, practices, and projects covering environmental, economic, social, and cultural sustainability dimensions. And they're also located either in rural villages, remote rural areas, or rural areas close to cities. And in total, 530 cases of women-led innovations were collected. And from this inventory, we selected 10 women for each case study in each country, considering the sustainability dimension and the typology of rural areas, meaning that we ended up with 200 pathways of women in innovation. We did the interviews last spring, so almost a year ago. From these interviews, we have published 20 national case studies, 200 fact sheets of the women we interviewed, a comparative analysis across EU level, and 10 practice abstracts with lessons learned. And this material is available on the FLIARA website. So the women we interviewed show very few common patterns when it comes to demography. They vary in age and family status, and also how they made their project happen. However, most of them are highly educated, as we've also heard here previously. And all of these women innovators are portrayed with their own fact sheet on the website. Going into the key findings and what we have learned from the 200 interviews, we see some clear challenges and constraints, and much of this is also what we've already heard today here as well, so we're echoing that in a way. We see a limited access to resources, such as access to specific grants. It can be loans, funding, and financial support, both for startups and for expansion. There is also a limited access to information and being able to secure land, and an overall lack of tailored support. For example, we see that funding opportunities are commonly focusing on economic growth and are angled towards large-scale businesses and more tech industry than other sectors. Also, we see bureaucratic obstacles, such as delays and time-consuming regulations that need to be navigated. There is a lack of political support and interest that hinders the development of innovative projects. Also, funds are often difficult to apply for and comply with, and the competition is rough. Many of the women also state the difficulties in finding funding opportunities, even though they are out there. There is also regulatory challenges to do innovations since, for example, all businesses, no matter the size, operate under the same rules. Women innovators also face difficulty in juggling caring responsibilities and business management due to a lack of access to social services, like public preschools, daycare centers, and elder care services. There is also a challenge with poor service and transportation due to inadequate infrastructure. And lastly, when patriarchal social norms and expectations are a struggle, it is important to actually change these. Nevertheless, all the women that we have interviewed have been able to face these challenges. They have been in many cases supported by partners, by relatives or friends, and many of them have received financial support through public grants. And through this, they have been able to make impact with their innovation.
Thank you, Annie. As Annie underlined, these women contributed to the development of rural areas in many ways, and their innovation have multiple impacts, helping to improve the social, economic, environmental, and cultural sustainability of these areas. The case study shows that the women are boosting the local economy and creating new jobs. They are promoting social inclusion, for example, by providing jobs for vulnerable people and by helping to create a sense of community among local people. They are also spreading awareness about environmental sustainability and healthy lifestyle, showing the benefits of living close to nature and the value of producing and consuming local products. Although these women are sometimes seen as crazy by the local population for initiating innovative ideas in a still male-dominated context, the result of their activity are changing this vision. Women are recognized as innovative farmers, innovative entrepreneurs. Some of them have received national awards that increase their visibility of their work. Others have gained popularity among the local community. So these women are showing that new ways of farming and breeding, working and being an entrepreneur in rural areas is a valuable choice. And in this way, they are encouraging also other people to look at and start engaging in farming and in or in a rural business. The participation of women in network as well as in farmer and entrepreneur association, organization, and also in the local institution also turned out to be extremely important to amplify women's voices in policy discussion, highlighting the specific needs, as you can read in a quota here in the slide. So their action is challenging the patriarchal normality that often dominates the rural world. So in conclusion, our work has also provided insights into the policies needed to support women's innovation. First of all, in line with what Thomas has already highlighted this morning, networking is relevant. Peer, local, and wider networks are useful for sharing and gaining knowledge, information, and resources, and for taking advantage of new opportunities. Network should also should be supported not only financially but also logistically. For example, local authority could provide spaces for organizing meetings and events. Then we have seen that many of the innovation studies interconnect environmental, economic, social, and cultural sustainability. So the projects undertaken are often cross-sectoral. So this call for more integrated policy, which would also facilitate access to funding by no longer requiring cross-sectoral projects to be split between different funds or different goals. Another point that was stressed is the need of a targeted financial program to support women innovation. For example, in the context of a small business, a social project, small-scale farming, more environmental friendly farming practice, and renewable energy technology. So also CAP intervention at the national level could target women more specifically. As Elena Schubert has also underlined this morning, hopefully the member states will do this in the next CAP, as Spain has already done in the current CAP. Another point is mentorship programs that have also been suggested, where experienced women can guide newcomers and where best practice could be transferred effectively. Furthermore, the need for funding that does not require an upfront payment to receive the contribution was also highlighted. A more flexible legislative framework, then, with a view to reducing bureaucracy, not only in accessing funds, but also in obtaining permits to start a new activity, has also been suggested. And also Sasha before has underlined this point. Across country, we found that really few women know what ACIS is. It seems therefore necessary to improve the visibility and the effectiveness of ACIS. Furthermore, access to information and the availability of a financial support program should be organized more effectively. For example, by promoting more information events at the local level, but also the platform that was named by Elena this morning could help. Then, in many countries, supportive sick and maternity leave policy, childcare facility, and after-school service are needed to facilitate the reconciliation of work and family life. We found also in several countries more than one project implemented in a public space or on a public land. So making this available, including for calls for proposal, could encourage women's innovation, especially when it comes to projects starting from scratch. In addition, promoting local food policy can support women innovative practice, as well as the creation of private-public partnership, which could also be a means of ensuring the maintenance of service at the local level. Finally, as also Alexandra and Alicia underlined before, there is a need for training that is more tailored to women's needs. So to conclude, women are challenging patriarchal normality and gender norms, paving the way for future generations, showing how rural and farming innovation can offer creative and sustainable ways to make a living in a rural area. But as we have tried to show in this short time, there are still open issues that politicians, local institutions, community could and should consider to promote gender equality and empowerment of rural communities. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any question or comment, please add them to Slido. And if you want more information, as also Anne underlined, you can find on our website the fact sheet illustrating the journey of the 200 women interviewed and all the national case study reports. Thank you.
Excellent, Sylvia and Annie. Thank you so much for such a comprehensive overview of all the work that was carried out in relation to our case study work on FLIARA. And I suppose in many respects, what stands out for all of us in the project is how all of these women have crossed that divide of contributing to sustainability in rural areas, both on their farms and in the broader rural area. Each and every one of them, no matter what aspect of sustainability, these women have been shown to contribute to it. And I suppose that for us, was a fantastic idea and I suppose result of the work that was done via the case studies. So again, well done to Annie and to Sylvia for presenting that work. And as they said, please look on the FLIARA website to find out all about the fact sheets, all about the individual reports from all of that work. It's all available on our website. So thank you very much to both of those. Now I want to go another aspect of the work that we carried out on FLIARA, which really was a central focus of FLIARA from the word go, was spotlighting the women and spotlighting the women that are engaged in innovative practices in farms and in rural areas. We carried out a lot of that work through our community of practice. And Anastasia Opera has worked extensively on that for economies and for the FLIARA project. So I'm going to hand it over to Anastasia to explain a little bit more about our community of practice via the FLIARA project.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Maura. Can you see my presentation in presentation format?
Yes. Yes.
Because I'm a bit lost in my slides. So thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm Anastasia. I work for the European Network of Community-Led Initiatives for Sustainability and Climate Change. And within FLIARA, I've been working on the community of practice, which is defined as a group of people with shared interests who collaborate and learn together to develop and apply their knowledge. This community of practice has been central for the FLIARA project, consisting of 3 elements. The domain, in our case, in the case of the FLIARA community of practice, the domain is the women-led innovation in agriculture and rural areas with a sustainability dimension, with the practice being the innovation that the women bring, that you can read more about on our website, and the community coming into being during our in-person and online networking events, but also through our LinkedIn group, and most importantly, within our policy workshop during these events. At the center of the FLIARA community of practice are the 20 women ambassadors. You've heard already Sasha, and they were selected during our previous research stage. As you've heard from Sylvia and Annie, they come from the 20 countries, from the 10 countries, 2 ambassadors from each country, so 20 ambassadors in total. They are central for the series of 4 in-person events that we are implementing within FLIARA, which is complemented by a series of 5 online events with the communication kept going on the FLIARA LinkedIn group throughout the project. The 4 in-person events that I mentioned happened in the 4 macro regions that the FLIARA project is looking at, namely the Atlantic one in Ireland, the Central and Eastern European one in Slovenia, the Southern Mediterranean one in Italy, and then the Nordic Baltic one in Sweden. The first event took place in Galway, hosted by the university in July. We have met there with various stakeholders and actors. Then in Ljubljana, we have had our first field trip, which we continued as activity during our event in Italy this past January. And we will continue implementing at all these events our FLIARA multi-actor approach, which is a collaborative methodology, meaning to create this networking platform where the women, especially the FLIARA women ambassadors, but also the FLIARA innovators, which we have met during the events as well, if they came from the national host country. So at this network, within this networking platform, we want to have the women at the center, the women who lead sustainable, scalable, and impactful innovations. Like I was saying, the FLIARA ambassadors, but also the other women innovators, and create this space for them to connect with each other, but also to bring together diverse stakeholders and actors with diverse perspectives. Besides the FLIARA ambassadors and the women innovators, the FLIARA consortium and the strategic stakeholder advisory board, for the FLIARA, as well as other researchers are part of the FLIARA community of practice, together with the policymakers who participate at our events. They can come from national institutions, but also from European institutions. We had MEPs present at the event in Ireland, for example, but we also have there participating representatives of local action groups, of national leader authorities, of CAP national networks, as well as other types of practitioners. The idea of bringing all these actors together at our events, and especially during our policy workshops, is to co-create knowledge, to exchange solutions, but also to contribute to policy recommendations through the policy workshops. Here's some feedback from our FLIARA ambassadors after participating in the community of practice FLIARA networking events. You will notice that the project is perceived as powerful, as a catalyst for energy, but also as an inspiration for other women to start new projects. The field visits and in general the time spent together by the innovative women is considered very valuable to showcase their realizations, but also to take advantage of these networking opportunities. The idea of mutual help has come very clearly through this networking activities, and of strengthening the network so that they can keep helping each other as well in the future. And I'm sorry, I have lost my slides again. Here I am again. To conclude, the impact and outcomes that we see from the FLIARA community of practice at this point is definitely a strengthening of the networks and empowerment of the innovative women by creating this platform within FLIARA for women innovators to connect with each other, as well as other key actors who can support their innovations. We do want to support their network and this wider network, which also includes us alongside them, but also to support mutual empowerment as they come together, as well as enhance recognition and support. So ensuring that the female-led innovations receive the visibility they deserve. We're also doing that through a visibility campaign led by Consulta Europa, but also by showcasing their innovation journeys. We hope that they receive the recognition they deserve, and also the policy backing, which we're doing through our policy work packages. But also we want to support and contribute to driving this meaningful change, right? So the solutions that are showcased through their innovations journeys of the ambassadors show that they are very clearly tailored to contemporary complex challenges which are faced in agricultural and by rural communities. And it is important for us to recognize the leadership of women for more sustainable, adaptable, and scalable solutions to respond to these complex challenges. Do not forget to add your questions if you have any. And you can join us and enter the conversation with the community of practice by joining the FLIARA Community of Practice LinkedIn group. You can scan right now the QR code and post, share, and engage with the FLIARA ambassadors and the rest of the stakeholders directly in the group, but also stay posted for upcoming FLIARA Community of Practice online event on bridging private and public funding for women innovators in agriculture and rural areas, which will provide training regarding access to finance for women innovators. Thank you very much.
Anastasia, thank you so much. Again, I suppose giving that idea of what our community of practice, our FLIARA community practice was all about. And I suppose it was a hugely successful part of the FLIARA project, spotlighting, bringing together, co-creating ideas, co-creating policy, making sure that the women were part of the policy that we were creating through those events has been hugely successful. Bringing their voice to the table, I think, was a huge part of what we tried to achieve. And again, carrying on those conversations via, as Anastasia said, the LinkedIn, the online events that we still have to have, and one, as Anastasia said, coming up in April, at the end of April. So please join us for that as well. So Anastasia, thank you very, very much for that insight into our community of practice. Okay, we're going to go to our final section, I think, of our interactive panel that we're going to have this morning or this afternoon now at this stage. And I'm going to call on Irene Leonardelli, and Irene is from the University of Calabria, and she's one of our partners. And Irene is going to moderate the interactive session where we have some, again, very knowledgeable and fantastic people to contribute. So Irene, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So this session is going to be about unlocking opportunities for women in rural innovation. And we have some wonderful panelists today. The first one is Betty Ann Bryce, who is a senior policy analyst at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, in the Center for Entrepreneurship, Regions and Cities in the Regional and Rural Unit. Then I'm going to welcome Alexandra Nidzinska, and she's a partner at Gender Solution, a group of gender equality experts with expertise on European organization. Then the third panelist is Sally Shortall, and she is the project coordinator of the Grass Ceiling Project. And then we have Ursula Kelly with us, and she's one of the two FLIARA Irish ambassadors and the managing director of Cormac Tagging, a business producing cattle tags based in Galway, Ireland. And yeah, and then we have Maura Farrell, FLIARA project coordinator at the University of Galway. You already know her by now. Yeah, so I want to start this session with a question for Betty and Bryce, which is, so one of the issues we found in the FLIARA project was the difficulty women have in accessing land for innovative practices. So we wanted to ask you if in your own work you encountered policies or programs that could assist women innovators gain access to land.
Sure. First, I want to say thank you for the invitation and for being part of this panel. I see familiar faces, so I welcome the opportunity to have this discussion. I'm going to answer your question in two parts. One more broadly, and one is what we don't see enough of is the evidence. Policymakers, whether we like it or not, react to evidence. So there is sometimes an argument for gender inclusion that is based on equity. I think that's a good argument to have, but another side of that argument is evidence. So when I talk about rural proofing, I always talk about rural proofing intelligence. And as I was listening today, I thought about rural gender intelligence. By this, I mean, there is evidence for why women should be at the table and what they bring to the table. I heard it referenced, but how is it arranged and how is it gathered? I think your project is gathering that evidence. but having some distinct evidence on why gender should be included is just as equally as valuable to getting the attention of decision makers. And I hear my equity colleagues going, you should just do it because it's equity. And we also know that that sometimes is not enough. But the reason why a woman leading a business and how women-led business owners are making a difference is actually a lot more, moves the needle just a bit more in that policy framework. Now, what I will say more specific to our work, yes, we do. The Rural Innovation Agenda highly encourages gender equality, inclusiveness, and we look at cross-cutting initiatives and recommendations that could do that. So we look at land tenure reforms. We look, of course, you are very well leader, and we also look at place-based innovation strategies. So we look at those countries that have done that, and we see examples coming out of Canada, and I list them because they're a non-EU country, and they do a lot of work in their indigenous work on ensuring gender-sensitive approaches to land management. And then, of course, there's some examples in Spain through their Rural Women's Network, and in France, where they look a lot at ethical land access and including women innovators among its beneficiaries to land. So there are examples of that. But for me, I really want us to come back to where's the evidence? Because as you're thinking about this, we have to think about who you're trying to have make room for women. And sometimes they're decision makers who don't think from an equity point of view. They think from a why am I doing this point of view? And we need to be collectively working on getting the evidence, getting it in place to also put that on the table. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you very much. This was very insightful. We hope to contribute to this evidence with the FLIARA project, with all the work in the different countries. So I'll go on with a second question for Alexandra Nidzinska, which is about how can funding mechanisms and financial institutions better support women-led innovations in rural areas, considering limited resources and bureaucracy?
Thanks, Irene. I just would like to jump on what Betty-Ann said, because I think it's absolutely crucial. And having this evidence on why it is important to invest in women innovators is a part of the solution and the answer to your question. And if we look at how, for example, the whole discussion around the Women on Boards directive in European Union looked like, was a lot about showing business case for the companies that it is important to invest in women on boards. And maybe this is now the moment that we show specific evidence that it is important to invest in women innovators in the agri-food sector. And we do have these data. It is now the question on how we show it and the narrative that comes with showing it. But coming back to your question, I think given the fact that right now we really have, unfortunately, another wave of gender backlash, I believe, and diversity and inclusion backlash connected with climate change, doubts, and bringing it to the question if that really happens. We really need to think on how to mobilize resources that we will have that will be limited, and that's the reality we'll have to live in. And looking at what worked in many countries that we have researched that are functioning in very challenging times, like Ukraine, for example, or Western Balkans countries, where still gender equality is a bit of a controversial topic. We see that what works very well is partnerships between public and private institutions that are creating micro-blending mechanisms that help women to get loans, to get financial mechanisms. So this is on one hand. So it's not on the shoulders of one institution, but it's a joint effort. And on the other hand, those programs or those mechanisms needs to be accessible to women. And accessible, that means that they need to be clearly presented, that they need to be easily understood, not written in the jargon. And actually, the chat from this webinar is very interesting. I will get back to it, but there are some good examples of how we can do it. So after the event, we can also get back to there for some inspirations.
Thank you, great. Yes, we also found out in the several interviews that we have done in the context of the FLIARA project that public-private partnerships are really key, really important to support women innovators. So we hope those will be strengthened. And yeah, so I move on with a question for Sally Shorter. In relation to the grass ceiling project, what key findings have emerged regarding helping rural and farm women to access finance for innovative practices? So also connected to the previous question to Alexander.
Thank you. And again, I'll just start by saying thank you for inviting me here. It's been really interesting to hear what our sister project is finding. And I will come to your question, but I just want to come back to Betty Ann, who I think made a really important interjection. And Betty Ann, I completely agree. And I think we do have evidence that women, especially in agriculture, are leading on ecological transitions and very much adopt a farm-to-fork approach and the type of way we want agriculture to go in the future. So I think we need to be supporting those types of initiatives because it's kind of following the path that we want agriculture to go. The other thing I think that it's important to highlight, and I think one of the earlier speakers mentioned it, we're finding in grass sealing that women are leading on social enterprises in very remote areas. So they're building the kind of community infrastructure like cafes, libraries, services for older people that the market will never be able to create in those places because of demographics and they're too remote. So I think we need to perhaps think, should the state be funding those types of activities? Anyway, to come back to the question you asked me about how to help women access finance, some of what I'm going to say echoes what Annie and Sylvia said earlier. There's definitely a need for more access to microfinance for women because often in rural and remote areas, women are looking to generate self-employment or perhaps employment for one or two other people. So if you look, for example, at the local enterprise offices in Ireland, there is no available financial support for those types of activities. So we need to really look at microfinance. Sylvia also mentioned this. We need to think, and perhaps the European Leader funding could help here, about providing some grants for small startups that do not require match funding, because that again is another obstacle. We found in grass sealing that in our living labs where we work with 8 innovators, that peer-to-peer learning is really important in terms of informing each other about pots of funding that are out there and how other people have accessed finance. I think there's small things we could do, like informing or including women's name as a landholder for cap payments, or on the herd, that would provide more collateral when you go to negotiate with the bank. I think we also probably need to push for unconscious gender bias training with banks and with cooperatives, because I think there is an unconscious bias away from very kind of small employment initiatives. One other issue I have, and I've wrestled with this now, I think, for over 30 years, but how do we marry kind of small initiatives that are purely focused on women, which tend to be on the sideline, with ensuring that women are properly integrated into mainstream finance provisioning as well? And that's something I think we really need to think about going forward. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Very inciting and insightful, and going on with one of the element you raised is the importance of peer-to-peer learning. Now I would like to ask a question to Ursula Kelly, who is one of our FLIARA's innovator, one of our ambassadors. So if she has any advice, or what advice would you give, Ursula, to rural and farm women seeking finance to start or enhance an on-farm or rural innovation?
Thanks a million for having me, guys. I suppose I'd love to talk about everything and all inclusive in terms of what I've heard today. It's been amazing. I just want to talk a couple of things around the piece the ladies have raised already in terms of the finance piece. I think it hasn't been mentioned today, and I think that piece of succession comes into play around particularly that rural piece and how land is transferred across. Primarily in Ireland anyway, it's still that piece of it being transferred to the son rather than the daughter. So I think we need to challenge that at all levels. And building on from that, in terms of the evidence, it's just to show up for the other women and the other agri-entrepreneurs in terms of the evidence that I have come across in terms of building my business as an agri-entrepreneur. And one of that biggest challenges was around the land and the succession. But then in terms of that finance part of it, it starts with the fact that broadband is not, the connectivity across rural areas is not strong enough. And I suppose that's not a gender specific, if you look at it in isolation, but broadband, when you take into account the other roles that women play on farms, it then becomes very gender specific. I had to leave the family farm with my business because we didn't have stable rural broadband. And I think that is massive. If Europe could help with something in rolling out that every rural town across Europe, or every rural area across Europe has stable broadband, I think that would be a massive thing. In terms of the finance piece, I'm probably a little bit luckier, and then I'm an accountant by trade. So I would encourage other female entrepreneurs who wouldn't have that financial literacy to go and find it. We can't be experts at everything, and financial literacy to do anything, to do any agri sort of business, from primary agriculture to agri-food to agri-business, across those innovation streams, it does require a degree of financial literacy once you understand the figures. So I have looked upon and gone to, whether it be SPCI, I've looked at Leo in my early stage. I'm now an Enterprise Ireland client as I scale internationally. One of the things I would say here, and it's one of the pieces I love being involved in the FLIARA project, is I would see a little bit of a disconnect between the primary agriculture producer and then moving to that innovation and to agribusiness. So like one of the supports under the CAP at the moment is a measure to incentivize females in primary agriculture through TAMS grant. But I would say between TAMS and between our leader funding, I'd love to ask the policymakers here to include in the new CAP that agri primary piece is pulled on to come up with a pot of money for agri food producers and agri businesses. So I get what Sally was saying earlier about that 1 and 2 people, and there's so much sustainable reasons for that piece in terms of creating that employment at a local rural level. But I also go back to what was said earlier about the 3% of venture capital funded projects, that if you want to be that global company in a rural area, there should be no blockage. There should be no reason as to why my business still isn't on the farm. And until our next generation can see that you can do this, there is no barriers. You can scale your business to be whatever you want that to be. I think 3% that will go down if this generation doesn't show up and show that it is possible and you can do it. But we need to remove the barriers to do it. I don't know if that answered the project or the question, Irene, but.
Thank you, Ursula. Always very, very inspiring, your work and your words, also inspiring other women, I'm sure. Yeah, I think I'll pass it back to Maura if she wants to share some key points also related to the work we have done in the context of the FLIARA project, related to what the speakers just shared. I want to thank you all. It was very insightful. Would be great to ask more questions, but I think we are already beyond the time we had for this session. So yeah. Maura, back to you. Thank you.
Irene, thank you so much. And I think that's always one of the crux of these, I suppose, these events. You know, we could have so much work on discussion, but today was very much about disseminating the work. But just a couple of points in relation to everything that was said there. And I think Betty Ann is very, very right. You know, the evidence is there. But then I think, as I've seen in one of the comments, I think it is Martha in the SWIFT project, we're producing the evidence at this stage. I think Sally Shortall has been producing evidence for many, many years. And when we talk about inspirational people, I think Sally has carried this torch for many, many years before I got involved or anybody else got involved. And I think when it comes to evidence, we don't have to look much further than what Sally has produced. And again, the grass ceiling, the SWIFT project, but all of the other projects we've listened to today, the evidence is there. But again, Betty Ann is very, very right. The policymakers want that evidence. They need that evidence. And how we produce it, how we present it becomes very, very important as well. And how we make sure that it is wrapped in policy that is presentable and acceptable. I think as well, other speakers spoke about that mobilization of limited resources going forward. That's a key worry, concern for all of us. We're in a very, very changing geopolitical environment at the moment that is going to, whether we like it or not, impact on the funding going forward. I think this is where women can win. The women have been driving forward for many, many years with very limited resources. So I think they are the people who may win at this time. With limited resources, they can do so much. And the so much is what we have seen already. And I think Sally mentioned this as well. The so much is what we have seen in the FLIARA project. These women are making impacts across every part and element of sustainability. And I think Sally mentioned social enterprise. She mentioned environmental impacts. We've seen this as well in the FLIARA project. We've seen the environmental impacts that every single person we've talked to, every woman that we've talked to can make. Those social enterprises that are making a huge impact on communities, we've seen this already. Again, those ideas of finance, let it be microfinance, let it be startup finance. What we also found in the FLIARA project, scaling up. You know, Ursula has talked about her business, bringing it now international. That didn't happen without huge work and huge effort. But what we often found and what we found in the FLIARA project, once women got to a certain level in relation to their innovation or their farm diversification, then a lot of the supports were no longer available to them. So scaling up becomes very acceptable for men entrepreneurs out there. But when it comes to women, when they talk about scaling up, they found a very block at that stage. So the startup, the seed funding, all of that is acceptable, but we also must think about scaling up for these women as well. So all of the financial ideas that were mentioned, that Sally mentioned and other people mentioned as well, those are all exactly what we found. Ursula brought some really good points. And I've said this in many situations at this stage. Within an Irish context, we're continuously at the moment talking about generational renewal. We're talking about young farmers, and we're generally, without it being said, talking about young male farmers. We need to bring in young women farmers into that generational renewal conversation. We need to make sure that women are part of that conversation, and we need to make sure that they're supported, and I suppose in a community base and in a farm base going forward. So I suppose those were some of the really good ideas that came forward from the panel, but are also reflective in the FLIARA project that we have found. So again, Irene, thank you very much for that panel. And we're going to finish up with a couple of, I suppose, reflections or final comments that have actually come into us during the week. Now, we have so many comments in the comment line on my eyeline here in the webinar chat. We have so many comments, we have so many questions. Any questions that are there, we really will try and answer them in the coming few days via the FLIARA website. So please log back onto that. If we can connect directly with people, we will try and do that as well, because there's also so many really great comments. So we might maybe collate those comments and try and put them out there as well as a result of the event that we had today. But over the last few days, we've had people come to us with questions that they have posed. And two of those questions we're going to put now to two people. And we're going to ask maybe Betty Ann Bryce and Elisa Krakowska to come back to us for a moment. And we're going to ask them two questions that have been posed in the last few days. And I also see these questions replicated in the chat today. So I might go to Alicia first of all. And one of the questions that was posed over the last few days via Slido, via our website, was how can we change the perception that successful rural women entrepreneurs are the exception rather than the norm? So any ideas at all, Alicia, you have on that?
Thank you so much. I think it's really a really interesting question. I think to change this perception, I would say we need to start by making their stories more visible. It was already mentioned before, but there are so many talented, hardworking women in rural areas building amazing businesses, but we just don't hear about them enough. So to highlight their stories, highlight their achievements in media, at the events, at the training programs. For example, in case of Eva, we have a dedicated tab on our website where we showcase our alumni stories, their businesses. We also share their testimonials, and we showcase their business website to promote them, and that's the least what we can do actually. And also by creating the supportive programs that we mentioned throughout the day, that are dedicated and tailor-made especially for those women. I think that's the least we can do, and just basically highlight their stories, highlight their achievements, and create opportunities for them to share their knowledge and their amazing businesses.
Well done, Alicia. Absolutely. Spotlighting, sharing, I think this really empowers women going forward. So thank you for that. Another question that came into us, and we might put this question to Betty Ann, and this again came into us over the last few days. How can we better support rural women in innovation? Should this be through rural development policies, a dedicated innovation hub, or something else? Any ideas at all, Betty, on that?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I'm going to cheat and respond to Alicia's question first, because you already figured out that's what I do. I'm going to add, and it's going to sound strange, but to her question, I would say lead with what they did first and the fact that they're women second. Because at the end of the day, they're seen as an exception because they're women. But if you lead with what they accomplished first in their story, and then afterwards you're like, oh, they're women, then it helps, as opposed to leading first with that. So how to, with innovation, I'll answer 2 questions. While I see the value of women-focused innovation hubs as a way of training and networking and support, I think that's secondary to keeping women at the big table. So when you separate women, then they're seen as separate from the larger discussion. Finding ways to keep women in the bigger networks where they're mixed within the sectors of agri or tourism, whatever their business is, keeps them as equals at the table. And so I'm getting that innovation experience that's equivalent to what men are getting or whatever other networks they're within. So for me, again, it comes down to, it makes sense for them to be in networks that are women-led, to get that training and to get that valuable experience. But please consider that secondary to policies that keeps them at the big table. Because once you go down the route of separating them, the perception of separation will follow. And then decision makers will see them as a secondary element. Oh, now we need money for women networks. And that's seems to be not what we want. So that's my kind of quick 2-cent response.
Great, Betty-Ann. And I think that's exactly what you have said is something that we followed very much on the FLIARA project right from the word go. And I think in spotlighting what women are doing, we come to realize the value of what they do. And you start to see, okay, the women are there, but the value of the work that they do on the farms, the work that they do in the communities, the economic advantage of the work, the cultural, the social, all of that work adds such value to rural environments, to rural communities, to farms. And I think we've always said that. I think if we can see the value of the work, then it becomes supported irrespective of who's doing it. And I think that has always been our agenda in FLIARA. And I think that's the way in which we're going to go forward with our policy ideas, I think, going forward. So again, thank you for I suppose, reminding of that in the FLIARA project, and again, identifying it. As we start to think about closing the event this morning, we haven't got too much over time, a few minutes, not too much. But again, I want to just thank a few people. I want to thank, first of all, our own partners in the FLIARA project, who have been nothing short of amazing. One particular person I think that we should thank today is Constante Europa's Victor Martinez. And Victor is that person behind all of the structure of the event that we have today. Victor is not just a partner, he is somebody who has taken on the FLIARA project from such a personal standpoint. Everything we do, it has to be 100% for Victor. And I think this is signs on today. He has been behind the scenes, but given us such unbelievable support. So a special thanks to Victor for all the work in creating this wonderful event for us today. The panelists who came on with us today, we had, of course, our own FLIARA material being presented, but we also had a huge perspective of other people doing similar work right across Europe and internationally right across the globe. And again, I think to our 2 sister projects, the SWIFT project and Sally Shortall's project, Grass Sealing, which add so much to the work that we do, and hopefully we add to the work that they do. To, of course, our own FLIARA ambassadors, all of the FLIARA people, all of the FLIARA women who engaged in our project, also thank you so much. Particularly, I think, just to circle around, to start with this morning, we had Elena Schubert from the European Commission. I think so much of the work that we do, so much of the policies that we will have going forward from FLIARA will land at the table of people like Elena, will land at the table of many, many member states right across Europe. We really need to let them, as Betty-Ann said earlier on, let them look at the evidence, let them support the evidence, let them support the good work that women are doing right across Europe. And I suppose change policy, restructure policy, support policy for these women going forward. And I think that's what we're trying to do in FLIARA as well. So on all of that note, again, I want to thank all of the audience. I think at one stage we had well over 140 people that logged on this morning. I want to thank you most sincerely. Please log on to the website for all of the work that we have done so far, and watch out for the policy directives that we have coming forward. Gormina Mahagat, thank you very, very much. And hopefully we will see you at a FLIARA event again in the future. Thank you very much. Bye for now.